Good afternoon, and welcome to Achieving a Single Source of Data Truth with Joel Vengco, VP and CIO at Baystate Health, a webinar tweet chat combo from healthsystemCIO.com, sponsored by Premier. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. My name is Anthony Guerra. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of healthsystemCIO.com, and I will be your moderator today. We are hosting a tweet chat going on right now with Managing Editor and Director of Social Media, Kate Gamble. You can participate in a separate browser or on your phone by using the hashtag HSCIO chat, and you can view the tweet chat in the Media Viewer panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Also, we encourage you to send in questions today. You can send those in using the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Leave the default set to all panelists. You can send them in as they occur to you. We're going to pose them to our speaker later in the program. You can download the deck using the URL on your screen. It's on the bottom of our slides, and it will also be sent out in the chat box. Just so you see how we're going to spend our time today, first we're going to hear from Joel Vengco, VP and CIO at Baystate Health. Then we're going to hear from our sponsor, represented by Ryan Adams, VP of Enterprise Analytics with Premier. And then we will have our Q&A. So without further delay, we're going to turn it over to our good friend Joel Vengco. Joel, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks a lot, Anthony. I appreciate you guys having me on this afternoon. It's a pleasure to always be with you guys and provide some information to the folks that are listening on. So just a little bit about Baystate Health briefly. Baystate Health is a roughly $2 billion company, or organization rather, 12,000 employees. We have 5 hospitals and academic medical center, and recently we announced an affiliation with UMass Medical School, and we're opening up a medical school here in Springfield, Massachusetts, and it's going to be focusing on population health, which is really part and parcel of our mission overall at Baystate Health, and so we're truly excited about that. We also have 90 medical groups of VNA. We have the largest reference lab here in the region, and we also oversee Baystate Health Partners, which is a PHO here in Western Mass, and that PHO is also involved with the NextGen ACO and oversees the ACO here for Western Massachusetts. We also operate a commercial health plan, Health New England, and so needless to say, lots of parts and pieces, but also lots of data that we're collecting. And that's really the topic of today's presentation, is to really discuss the appetite for data by healthcare institutions like Baystate Health, but also what it would take to really bring and harness that data in a centralized platform to really utilize it for the purposes of healthcare delivery in the future. Before I get into that, I think many of you probably know this story here about Target and how it has this really amazing capability of predicting what you and I and everyone seems to want to purchase next. In this case, as you've probably heard this famous story, you know, father didn't realize that his daughter was pregnant, but Target knew before he did. And the reason being is that, you know, back in 2001, Target really focused on centralizing a lot of its data from its physical locations to the creditors that it works with to its sort of, you know, sort of nascent online presence at that time, but really bringing it all together and creating a single database. At that time, there was 20 or 30 sources that they had sort of nationally, and that created an ability for them to get into the CRM space, customer relationship management space, which allows them to really predict specific scores for certain things like pregnancy score or pregnancy prediction score, or in the case of pet owners, you know, do you actually have a pet, and is it a new puppy? And so we'll send you, you know, carpet cleaner for the first couple of months, et cetera. But these are things that you know, retailers have begun to do and have done very successfully, is to sort of predict what we're going to do next. And the question is whether healthcare has the ability to do the same thing, and what it's going to take for us to do just that. Is it more complex than these retail institutions? And the answer is probably a little bit of yes and a little bit of no, but hopefully we'll sort of discuss that throughout this presentation and then discover what perhaps we can start to do. I don't think I have all of the answers. In fact, I probably don't have the answers at all, as I think you probably hope, but I can at least give you some idea of what we're trying to do about this to try to get to that place where retail and other industries are already achieving and acquiring. So, many data drivers in healthcare, obviously, and some of the ones that we all know and perhaps not love are things like HITEC and meaningful use, but certainly that's driven the digitization of healthcare and has created really a lot of data exhaust for providers, but also data exhaust from patients, and meaning there's a lot of data that's already being generated even just by patients entering into the healthcare system. And with the EHRs, a lot of data collection is occurring in many stages of the patient's continuum of care. The second, of course, is the healthcare reform, and we all know this very, very well, but everything from episodic single patient care to population health really sort of focuses on the collection of data and the collection of information and actually the use of information and data throughout the continuum. And in order for us to really get to this next stage, or really this new way of delivering care, patient-centric care, pay for value, we really need knowledge and insight, and it's critical for us to really consume this data and utilize it for what we know as a learning organization, or what we're aspiring to be, which is really an information and insight-driven healthcare delivery system. And of course, this next year and the years to come, with the focus on value, MACRA is hitting the stage this year, and there's a lot of requirements for health institutions to really focus on use of data to enable us to achieve these Medicare and quality report requirements that are really going to take the stage this year and really force us to utilize the data that we're collecting in our EHRs and in our digital systems, and really prove that we are delivering high quality and very safe care to our populations. Other drivers, of course, are things that we see in our day-to-day lives as health systems. Health system consolidation, continuous M&A is requiring us to have more and more data to understand whether or not those are the right things to do and to get involved with from a business perspective. We need to optimize our operations to ensure that we're not only efficacious but efficient in the way that we function. And of course, innovation. Innovation, I'll talk a little bit about at the very end, but that requires data, that requires information and insight. And in order for us to truly survive in this new era of healthcare, we can't just rely on operations. We have to continue to innovate. And that's a critical part of what it's going to take to be a health system in this competitive market. So the goals for Baystate, specifically for analytics and reporting, are probably very similar to the ones that you have. And these, of course, aren't the comprehensive list, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that I believe are goals for us, at least in this early stage. The first is to truly try to utilize the data from multiple sources within our healthcare system, our EHR, our ERP system, our rev cycle system, even our health plan that we own. We want to be able to take that data and inculcate it into the other data types that we have already in place. But we also are focused on what I'll call sort of non-healthcare data and exogenous data, data that's really outside of the healthcare space, but still is really useful in characterizing patients. And I think that's something that we need to reflect on more and more as we get into this analytical space, is that the healthcare data doesn't truly and holistically define a patient. And we have to understand that, and we have to really use that as part of the design of this overall data architecture is we have to begin to create a model that also includes that exogenous data. Often we characterize patients just purely on their healthcare utilization or their healthcare data. And I think we're seeing more and more that for population health purposes, for health and wellness purposes, we really need to understand the data that's outside of our healthcare system, because only then can we really truly change behaviors of the patient. We also want to be an insight-driven healthcare delivery system. We have, in the past, as I think many health systems have been, really focused on, let's call it non-standard care, lots of variations in care, and truly not data-driven in the way that we deliver care. And that needs to be changed for the future of the way that we want to deliver care, for sure. We also need to understand our population. Knowledge of the population for us is crucial and critical. You can't treat or you can't change the behavior of those that you don't know about. And I think that's where the targets of the world have become successful. They really understand their population that they serve, their customers. And in order for them to service them at the optimal, they need to understand what those customers need. And we need to do the same in healthcare. And of course, the proverbial predictive analytics and quality and safety, those are areas that we continue to aspire towards as we go down this data journey at Baystate. So as I mentioned, the sort of the continuum of care is our focus, but truly broader than just the health system itself. We really need to look at all entities within the sort of the environment of the patient, everything from the gym to the church to social services, and of course the healthcare institution. So it's more than just the health system data that we're focused on. We're truly focused on bringing to bear data across the environment for the patient. So as we think about defining a patient and what data elements we would want to bring in to characterize that patient, it's really everything that we have been talking about since since a decade ago in terms of how to characterize patients in the health system or in the context of the health system, but also outside of that. Data from the retail purchases, data in social media. Of course, we're talking about genetic testing, but everything that that other industries are already collecting to characterize that their customers, we need to begin to do. I think that will enable us to do better with population health, but also with providing patients truly with what they need in their management of their care. And of course, as we begin to characterize those patients and have these variables and factors that enable us to understand them better, it allows us to get into this what we'll call risk loop. But managing the population truly means that we need to understand that population, be able to stratify them, pinpoint risk factors that we can then take action on. And in many ways, this is what the CRM is built upon that retail organizations focus on and leverage. And so the CRM platform becomes even more relevant, and again, not just for marketing purposes. In fact, it's not for marketing at all. It's really for figuring out how to leverage CRM for population health, truly. And this idea of stratification, targeting, and then behavior change or action is what I believe something that the CRM platform can provide, or at least a CRM platform that's really focused on healthcare. Because at the end of the day, healthcare is supposed to be personal. And so as these retail organizations will tell you, the CRM platform allows them to personalize their services or their products to these customers. And why can't hospitals do the same? And we should be doing the same. So this is really, I think, the way of the future for institutions like a Baystate Health, who are looking to utilize their data across different verticals of sources that we have, and really attempting to utilize that data to engage outreach to patients to truly change their behaviors. So that's sort of what I call sort of the foundational or aspirational goals of Baystate with respect to the data, at least one of the areas of our goals. And I'm going to use that to sort of tether into how we are looking at architecting our back end to support those aspirations. But of course, before we get into what I'll call the potential solutions or the proposals, we also have to talk about the challenges that we face in doing this. And this is really no different from the challenges that you face in just creating basic analytic environments or reporting environments. Of course, the first large challenge is funding, trying to figure out how you can gain funding for an analytics center when, of course, there are a lot of other capital projects that need to be achieved. And so fighting for funding is certainly a challenge. And then, you know, in fighting for funding, you need to be able to represent the value of that Center for Analytics platform. And, you know, I highlight this idea of central analytics platform because, as you probably already experienced today, there are pockets of analytics happening in many of your business units already. And many of them believe that they are doing fairly well at that analytics and reporting capability, and they may be doing very well. But the fact of the matter is if you do an analysis on what you know, the finance department does and HR does, and you know, a service line within your medicine department does, it's all duplicative work that costs money, either an extra body or, you know, 2 or 3 dozen hours to really do many of the same things. Utilization reports are often duplicated in our health system, and oftentimes they don't match. And so then you end up going down this sort of cycle of trying to validate which one's right, and that takes a whole host of money as well. But to centralize it, at least in sort of a framework, is crucial. It, of course, makes people feel like they're giving up control, but that's precisely why you need a governance body, and we'll talk a little bit about that, to help people feel like they're going to be getting value out of this, even though they may be centralizing it, at least in the initial stages of the build. Some of the challenges also include speed to value. How do you realize that value immediately? Of course, there's a lot of impatience and sort of what I'll call misunderstanding of how to build these data structures and these data environments, and folks just believe that extracting data is easy and then putting it into a nice analytic framework is easy, and why shouldn't it be just 6 months? But as I think you all know and realize, it takes a lot more time than that. And so providing them with an understanding of that informatics problem, but yet getting them value, at least incrementally, is crucial here. And so, you know, education on informatics, or at least this idea of structured versus unstructured data and how difficult it is another challenge, but also the architectural challenge. There are analytic requirements that are going to be fleshed out as you decide what your scope is, and that will determine what that architectural sort of foundation will look like. And I'll talk a little bit about that and what we at Baystate have done to sort of flesh that out and where we've sort of gone with that architectural design. So this idea of a single source of truth is certainly an interesting concept. And, you know, right or wrong, there is a need to have some notion of that single source of truth, much like the story with Target. You know, they brought all of their data into a single platform, a single environment, at least in the early 2000s, and began to achieve that CRM capability. And I think in healthcare, we need to have some level of that as well to be able to characterize our population, to be able to understand utilization across our entities. So achieving that is absolutely something that many must consider, but it is a lot of work. You know, ERP system of the past and of current was actually thought to be the sort of the single source of truth solution, but that certainly failed because integration became difficult because systems, started to have their own central databases, and so the ERP system was no longer sort of the core system, only the core system, at least in healthcare institutions, and so that wasn't quite the solution that folks were looking for. And generally speaking, in the industries outside of healthcare, data is still fairly unstructured, and of course in healthcare it's even less so. So to enable a single source of truth, again, it's very, very challenging. You have to have rigor at data entry, particularly within the different source systems that you may or may not have control over. You have to have numerous integration points to create some level of a master patient index or a master data index. Mapping, normalization, and standardization, which you all know is not easy, has to be part of that process. And of course, continuing to manage that data and that knowledge is also another challenge, and it could be an expensive proposition. And so to have that single source of truth continuously being fed and managed is certainly a challenge. So yeah, single source of truth is certainly something that we need to aspire to, and I'll talk a little bit more about what the realities are there and whether or not it's even feasible, but there are challenges, and I think that those challenges create often what we'll call the inertia for achieving that. I already sort of talked about this a little bit, but in terms of data itself and standardization of that data, this is a large challenge. Certainly interoperability is a big topic these days, but semantic and syntactic interoperability are truly challenges for our health systems. I would say that our continuous work in trying to standardize the terminology and the information models within the EHRs certainly should progress forward. But again, that's a challenging, a very uphill battle, and it's a very challenging issue for folks. And I think we've been pushing that with the 21st Century Cures Act, but also other interactions with your vendors. And so it's going to take a lot of us to get together, continuously to get together to push that through. But that certainly is a large challenge. So when you think about the architecture, there's at least a dozen possible options to go down the path of, and I've just sort of named a handful here of the ones that we considered. And so the first that we considered was, geez, maybe we shouldn't do anything because nobody seems to want to put money into this, or at least it was sort of like pulling teeth to try to, insight into many of my peer leaders that, look, we really need to invest in analytics at these highest levels. Or we can keep the silos. We can just keep doing what we're doing in Excel spreadsheets and Access databases, and we can hope that we're getting some pretty good information from the data that we're collecting in our systems. So that's one option, certainly. The second is to begin to look into developing a traditional, EDW, RDBMS, which is really sort of the traditional canonical model of sort of dimensional flavor that has the layered tiers of the databases that we know and love, and work with sweet SQL queries on. And so those are certainly possible to. That's certainly a big a big option. A relational database structure is certainly something that's it's a good option. Or we can go down the sort of the other sort of spectrum and focus really on sort of the NoSQL movement, which is more of a sort of free-form database structure, if not even you could call it a database structure. It's really more name-value pair, but in many ways without the sort of dimensional structures and the relational database platforms. And then Hadoop, which is really more of a software than database, but can really sort of leverage high volumes of data and high velocity of data, is something that we would also consider, or we had considered. And then number 5 is sort of a hybrid approach of 2, 3, and 4. And what I have on the right side there for you is just sort of an idea of why you might go with a relational database versus a NoSQL database structure. And if you go to the next slide, and I won't perseverate on this too much, but you certainly will have these slides. But you'll see, and this is from Microsoft's web page, but you'll see the difference between NoSQL and SQL. And I just highlighted for you the areas that that I felt were, compelling differences between the two, and that were useful in trying to figure out if you had use cases for either one, which would be characteristics that you might leverage or rely on to say to yourself, well, I might go NoSQL versus SQL. But certainly NoSQL is what you see today in many of the online retail websites and more of the social media websites where there's a lot of free-form data and unstructured data. But there are a lot of benefits to SQL still, particularly with consistency of data structures and standardization. So there are pros and cons for both, and certainly Hadoop can sit on both of them, which I'll talk about in a minute. So the steps we took, and these of course are not all the steps, but hopefully you'll find these helpful in terms of trying to create that central source of truth, was, of course, first you got to determine whether or not your organization has an appetite for analytics. I would imagine that most do, simply because it's sort of the household, term right now. But you'll figure out quickly if they are truly interested in it, if they have the ability or the willingness to fund it, and at what level. The second step is to bring on champions across the enterprise very quickly. We unfortunately didn't put together the governance body until really the second year. And so I say unfortunately because I think, we lost some time without all of those different leaders on board. Now we had the CEO and our Chief Quality Officer on board, and so our first use cases were focused on population health and, patient flow, which I'd say are pretty good use cases. But because those other leaders were not involved, there was really no knowledge of this work happening. And so a lot of the help that we would ask them for often fell on deaf ears, or it would take a lot of time for them to get their resources in place. So creating that central governance body, I think, is a must up front, and then ensuring that folks understand what you're doing in that step, I think, is crucial to succeeding in the subsequent steps. Identifying 1 to 2 use cases is critical. I already mentioned 2 that we had focused on, but make sure that those use cases are data rich, because what you don't want to do is get into a set of use cases that don't allow you to identify data elements that are broad and reusable for other use cases. So try to get ones that are data rich, but also add operational analytics or reports to that list. So take 1 to 2 use cases that are unique, something predictive, maybe something that allows you to manage population health, but then also add in operational insights so that you can have a day-to-day use of that platform when you actually go live with it. Step 4 is really important, and this is in many ways the biggest, let's say this is sort of this is the friction point of much of this work, and I think it's something that people don't really give enough sort of leverage towards, or explain to their stakeholders that this is a crucial part, and this may actually take a long time, and that's data and knowledge management. And this has everything to do with mapping and standardization, normalization of the data. But this is a crucial piece of the puzzle. If you can't get the data right, you're not going to create great analytics. And so that's a very important piece of this, and I think this is what often, because it's probably the least sexy of this process, is what people, number 1, don't understand, but number 2, don't pay attention to. And so then you end up creating a lot of work downstream that you're going to have to redo because you don't have good data and knowledge management. And this is also called master data management. Step 5, understand your larger goals for analytics. In other words, understand what you're going to truly be using this for in the future. Is going to include data that's beyond your healthcare system? And if so, that's going to create a very different architecture for your platform. Find a vendor you're willing to partner with, and they're willing to partner with you. Healthcare analytics is still in many ways in early stages. Big data is really in early stages across all industries, really, but certainly for healthcare. And so if you find a partner that's willing to work with you, I think that's a big step to ensuring that you will succeed, even if it may take a few failures, but you will succeed as long as you've got a good, willing partner. Design for the future, I sort of mentioned that a little bit already, and then deliver incremental value while building. This is important. You don't want to build a central environment and then say, okay, after 5 years, here you go, and then people haven't gotten value over the last 5 years, but they spent $20 million. So ensure that you continue to deliver value while building, even if it's redoing or recreating reports that already exist, or providing what you would consider to be basic registries, but self-service is a big part of what you want to provide while you're building it. And even though they're old reports or reports that they already have access to, sometimes those are big wins, believe it or not. So this is essentially a very high-level sort of conceptual architecture of what we have landed on, and really the basis for this architecture is that we're focusing on a hybrid architecture that includes both the NoSQL sort of movement and the SQL movement. So EDW, obviously, it stands for the Enterprise Data Warehouse, and that's more of the relational flavor. But everything on the left, including the data lake and our Hadoop instance, are really about data in its rawest form, and allows us to provide either insight or data mining capabilities, or even predictive and alerting capabilities to those who want to drive behavior change even prior to it getting into the sort of the more standardized canonical model of the EDW through that capability of no aggregation, NoSQL environments. And so that's sort of at a high level what we've decided to sort of land on. And I know a lot of organizations are doing very similar things. And we continue to work through many of the operational mechanisms that ensure that we achieve integrity of the data, but also we're still working through many of the mechanisms to try to access that data and use them for operational use on our day-to-day basis. So this is sort of the highest level. At the left, you see some of the systems that we have begun to sort of pour through there. We are a Cerner shop at Baystate Health, but we also have SMS and GE, and of course Oracle and Lawson ERP systems, and those are getting pushed into what would be our data lake, and only a small portion of that right now are actually being standardized in the EDW, but we continue to work with our partner in Premier to pull that data from the data lake and put it into a model within the EDW, information model within the EDW. But I think what the main point of this is that as soon as you liberate that data from the enterprise source systems, and they're now in this data lake, you have access to that readily, and you have the ability to take advantage of those no aggregation, NoSQL capabilities to really drive insights that you have been aspiring to drive with that data outside of your source systems. The other way of looking at this also is that as soon as we have leveraged that data, so this is from the bottom up, it's sort of another view of that last slide, is that we have been focusing on ways to take that data and begin to expose that to what we'll call sort of the layer of action or the layer of insight, either through analytic modules or for analytic modules, also for app development, but also for our Innovation Center, which I'll talk briefly about in a few minutes. But this is really sort of a crucial capability for us, is to take that data out of our source systems, begin to map them across one another through master data management capabilities, and then develop a service layer either of APIs or of other access points to enable the modules above to access those so that we can provide them to the stakeholders in our enterprise, but also across the region. And so a lot of what we focus on, as I mentioned, are ways to move the data. Certainly FHIR is something that we're continuing to experiment with, as many are, and we have begun to also focus on SMART as a sort of an environment or a platform to develop applications on top of those APIs like FHIR, the FHIR standard. Just a couple of views of what we've begun to develop with third parties. This is just one of the population health dashboards that we're developing with a partner in TechSpring, and they're leveraging basically a combination of the data lake as well as the EDW to develop this dashboard. And so again, part of the beauty of having that sort of hybrid environment is that you don't have to wait for the EDW to be completed to begin to develop capabilities of reporting or analytics. You can start leveraging some of the near real-time results in the data lake and combine that with some of the standardized feeds that you're getting already in the EDW and come up with dashboards such as this. And this is just an operational dashboard that we developed with Premier, again, sort of using the same idea of a combination or a hybrid of the data lake and the EDW standard model. Okay, so let me take just one more minute, a couple more minutes to just briefly go over TechSpring, because I think it's important to mention that while this data and analytic platform is absolutely crucial for operating your health system going forward, and to build it is absolutely crucial, you can't ignore the need for innovation. And innovation is something that's going to, again, make a health system competitive in this competitive market. And TechSpring, I founded TechSpring in November of 2014 to really leverage that data capability and actually offer it to vendors, startups, partners to try to develop solutions on top of real-life data. And I think it's something that many health systems can certainly do with the data that they have once they've liberated it. And so TechSpring is not just a space, much like you'll see in Silicon Valley, but it also has the capability to provide, again, data and expertise and an environment for many of these startups and vendors to participate and really sort of incubate their solutions. The vendors that are named here are our sponsors, but they also are innovation members or partners within TechSpring. And the small startups aren't named here, but there are a number of them that have gone through the program, and a number of new ones that are coming through the channels. But these are just some of the areas that we focus on: next generation healthcare systems that are beyond the EHR, data analytics, which we talked about, mobile health and patient engagement, and of course biomedical technologies. So these are areas that require data, expertise in the health system, and also an environment to try to incubate those technologies or those solutions, and TechSpring is a channel for them to do so. And just briefly, just so you see sort of the structure of or the architecture of TechSpring, it's very similar to the operational structure that I just presented in the prior slides that we're using for Baystate Health. This is the way that TechSpring utilizes that same data. It's basically the same architecture. And on top of it, on top of this data warehouse, which there's another instance of that for TechSpring, tools, apps, modules are built to deliver that data back to the stakeholders or patients. So that was quite a long-winded way of saying that there are still a lot of challenges ahead. Data centralization and the development of a center for analytics is absolutely crucial. For us at Baystate, the focus is to create that hybrid environment because of the need for that near real-time data, but also the need to use and get value immediately, even well before the EDW is completed in terms of its information model. And I would say it's probably safe to assume that EDW will continue to expand its information model, so it will never really be completed truly. But certainly the ability for us to have access to standardized canonical EDW and sort of a more free-form NoSQL database, data lake, is certainly a useful scenario and combination for us. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Anthony.
Very good, Joel. Excellent presentation. So we want to thank you so much for that. And now we are going to hear from our sponsor, represented by Ryan Adams, VP of Enterprise Analytics with Premier. Ryan, thanks for joining us and thanks for sponsoring. Ryan, you with us?
Yeah, hey Anthony, thanks so much. Thanks guys.
No
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, fantastic. So thanks everyone, and I want to start by talking a bit about Premier, and then maybe leaving you with 4 things that I think have been helpful in our partnership with Baystate and the journey that they're on as well. But first, I just want to compliment Joel in the work that he's doing at Baystate and fighting the good fight to create kind of that source of truth. I'd say people ask me all the time, what's the #1 key component to a successful enterprise analytics and data warehouse strategy? And I always say this: you need that visionary, you need that champion to help align the data initiatives and analytics initiatives, because it is a journey with outcomes at the C-suite level. And Joel's been able to do that at Baystate, and kudos to him for the work that he's doing there. So we have been at Premier along on the journey, the enterprise data warehouse journey, with Joel and with Baystate, but also with many other health systems across the country. Just a little background on Premier. We represent about 76% of U.S. community hospitals. We've got a data footprint that includes over 40% of U.S. health system discharges. We are owned primarily by health systems and also are a publicly traded company. We work on both the acute care side and the ambulatory side, so I have a pretty sizable footprint for population health analytics that needs to incorporate both acute care health data and then also non-acute care data sets. Our enterprise analytics approach, and when we think about a strategy that's probably more general that our health systems are leveraging, really looks like a 3-horizon type model. And the foundation for it, as Joel's been talking about, is sort of that source of truth, that integrated data platform where you can bring together the EMR data and the financial data and the acute care data and the non-acute care data together in a platform to deliver analytics on top of. And so we sort of group this into kind of a lean horizon. Basically, the analytics that health systems need to do to kind of keep the lights on, that operational improvement, the quality and safety sorts of initiatives that Joel was mentioning, reducing cost per case, resource utilization, standardization. But there's this second horizon that an enterprise analytics strategy needs to encompass as well, and that's the transition to value-based care. As Joel was mentioning, the tectonic shifts that are occurring in healthcare around value-based care and population health, so the platform needs to be ready for that second horizon. And then I would say in the not-too-distant future, and this is why I really love the kind of the target example sort of a personalized medicine, precision medicine type flavor. The same platform that you invest in for Horizon 1 and Horizon 2 needs to power this personalized medicine innovation revolution that is coming. So we're investing in each of these horizons. We've got a data platform called PremierConnect Enterprise that many of our health systems are using across these horizons. And then key for us has been a focus on leveraging the data and the analytics to achieve outcomes. So that's kind of the centerpiece. And I think along the lines of Joel was talking about, how to gain buy-in and ROI for initiatives. It always starts with the outcomes and then works backward from that. So we think about the PremierConnect Enterprise platform, some of the components that Baystate and other health systems are using. It's really 5 components: the integrated data at the bottom, an enterprise data warehouse in the cloud, applications and analytics assets, training services, and then collaboration through a value acceleration group through peers, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So these are the 4 things maybe I'll just leave you with to sort of augment Joel's fantastic presentation. Joel mentioned the flexible architecture. He talked about sort of SQL versus NoSQL and Hadoop and kind of the idea of data lakes and more dimensional model type components. The number one thing I think is important is you're evaluating an enterprise data warehouse strategy is to look for an architecture that's flexible. Look for an architecture that has both sort of a data hub component or data lake component where you can drop unstructured data, where you can quickly deliver analytics on the fly, where you can launch self-service discovery capabilities, and then also a structured warehouse as well, sort of a data mart layer where the folks who are leveraging SQL can effectively create rapid analytics on top of that. So I completely agree that a hybrid architecture is pretty important as a number one piece. A second piece that we strive for, and I think Joel and Baystate have striven for as well, is providing both out-of-the-box solutions with your set of vendors, and then also self-service solutions. So there are use cases in your healthcare systems where you need a vendor to come in and just drop an analytic application on top of it. Maybe that sits on top of your data warehouse, and that's okay, and that's always going to be needed, always going to be useful. Premier indeed has a lot of these sorts of applications that we sort of drop in on top of existing data sources. But you also need the crack filler type of analytics applications, the integrated analytics applications, the sorts of use cases that need to be more broad and extensible and ad hoc and self-service. So our platform features both drop-in applications and then also a enterprise data warehouse where anything can be created essentially. The third element that you need is, of course, alignment with powerful use cases. So, Joel mentioned kind of governance. I echo the importance of setting up a governance body to essentially provide portfolio management for what you build on top of the enterprise data warehouse. So with an enterprise data warehouse, you have this blank canvas. Anything can be built. It's really important to align what you build with value as soon as possible. And then the fourth thing I would encourage is, as you're looking for enterprise analytics solutions and vendors partners who can help, is a peer group. So at Premier, we have a group called the Data Alliance Collaborative that meets regularly and sort of pushes analytics activities and provides education and collaboration, peer group collaboration, and that sort of thing. So I will just leave you with maybe this. If you're interested in finding out a bit more about what Premier can provide in this area, one of the best places to start is looking at a value roadmap. So no matter what place you're in on your analytics journey at your health system, you've got to find a way to align the investment, the technology, analytics, and data investment to value. We've got a process where we build a value roadmap. Essentially, we conduct discovery, determine what outcomes your group is trying to achieve, and then map a strategy to those outcomes. So if you're interested in hearing more about Premier services or how we can even help with a value roadmap, please reach out to me personally. I've got my email address on the slide. Thanks a lot, Anthony. Back to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ryan. Appreciate that, and Premier's sponsorship today. So we have time for a few questions. If you have any more that occur to you, send them in the Q&A box, and we'll try and get you out of here by the top of the hour, or the bottom of the hour, however you want to look at it. So basically, Joel, let's start with you. In your shop, how does your data lake differ from your data warehouse, and how real-time are your offline databases?
So our data lake is basically, the way that I look at it is that it is a replica of our source data model. So, for example, our Cerner application has a database, and that database basically is now replicated in the data lake. So it's in its rawest form. If data is requiring transformation prior to getting into the EDW, it will not be transformed in the data lake. So the data lake is basically the raw form of the data, but basically extracted from the operational database of the application. And it differs obviously from the EDW because, again, in its raw form, it's not standardized, it's not normalized, it's not placed in dimensional tables. It's basically in the original tables of the application. So the EDW is all of the normalization that you would expect in an EDW, plus it also basically integrates the data from sources, let's say our registration system and our ERP system and our EHR. The EDW would have those integrated if there's common data elements across those, or if an entity, for example, a patient as an entity would need to be created, those data elements are standardized in the EDW, again, in tables, in table structures. And then I think the other question was how near real time our offline databases. Is that what it was, Anthony?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So again, we rely on our data lake as well as other databases that I didn't actually reference. There's our health information exchange that we have that's pretty real time. That's pretty much real time, near real time, if you will, and we leverage those for things like alerts. So, for example, if there's a patient that gets seen or is admitted in the EDW, in the ED, and that patient is an ACO patient, we want an alert for that patient. That actually gets fired off from our health information exchange. It could also get fired off of the data lake. So there are alerts that actually occur from the data lake or the HIE, for example. On the EDW side, that's a little bit more of a latent database. Right now we are on a cycle of about 12 hours to get data into the EDW, so fully transformed and normalized into EDW. So those are certainly, that's not a place to do that type of alerting or that analytic real-time capability at this point.
All right, very good. Can you discuss your experience in dealing with fragmented patient data and the lack of good identifiers to link records?
That is the $60 million question for sure. Mm-hmm. You know, when we have focused on sort of this idea of master data management and enterprise master patient index, or let's call it just enterprise indices, the patient is really the first focus, patient and provider really. So those are sort of first two use cases. How do we really characterize and identify both of those objects or those entities? And so as I think I mentioned to you, we have a health plan, we have 5 hospitals, and we just acquired 2 over the last 2.5 years. We have 90 medical groups, and there are a lot of patient identifiers. So one of the things that we've been focusing on is an enterprise master patient index. We have in the past had, I think, 5 or 6 MPIs, if you will, and so we're trying to consolidate that into a single eMPI. We're also experimenting with using our Health Information Exchange's eMPI, which has been pretty successful in identifying patients, not even inside of our health system, but also across organizations who we don't affiliate with or we don't own. So there's a pretty powerful eMPI in there. So we've been experimenting with, or actually we've been utilizing the different technologies that we have, but our first focus is really to consolidate the MPI solutions that we have into a single solution, and that's where we're standing right now from an enterprise perspective.
Very good. All right, I just want to get one question to Ryan before we finish up. Ryan, tell me, you deal with a lot of different providers, so what are you seeing as sort of commonalities in terms of problems and possible solutions in this area?
Yeah, good question, Anthony. So, you know, we do deal with lots of providers and have kind of a broad perspective. We've seen a lot of enterprise analytics strategies play out, and so, you know, I would say at this stage we see a lot of clear success patterns and struggle patterns. I think that the number one struggle versus success pattern is all around a clear roadmap to value and executive buy-in, and sort of this idea that I mentioned in my conversation part, you know, building out kind of an ROI and championing that to the executive group. So I would say clear success pattern for enterprise analytics is having strong executive ownership, this idea of a very clear roadmap to value and ROI on top of the data and analytics platform, being able to then pivot that into resources that match the roadmap, so it can't be an unfunded mandate, and then making sure that, as was mentioned in this presentation, you're delivering incremental value against that roadmap over time. It can't be a situation where you sort of, you know, build out the platform for many months and years and then sort of surface with some value. You've got to have 90-day wins. So those are some of the success patterns that we see, and kind of the struggle patterns are really the opposite. No executive ownership, unclear roadmap, just a technology investment without fully understanding which use cases are going to be first and prioritized.
Very good. Excellent. All right. Well, that's about all we had time for today. When you close out your WebEx window, you'll be taken to an event survey. If you could take a moment to answer those questions, we'd appreciate it. I want to thank our speakers, Joel Vengco and Ryan Adams, and Premier for sponsoring the event. For those of you who are here for some continuing education, attending our webinars gets you 1 CEU towards the CHIME CHCIO program. If you've asked us to let CHIME know you were here, we will. And if you haven't, then please remember to alert CHIME of your attendance. If you need just a general certificate of attendance towards another CEU program, you can use the final slide in this deck. You'll receive an email when our archive recording of today's event has been posted to our YouTube channel. And if you're interested in sponsorship opportunities, you can contact Nancy Wilcox from our team, and of course go to our website to see our upcoming schedule. So with that, I want to again thank Joel, Ryan, Premier, our attendees, and everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you.